Do the Spurs, you think, try to speed up a bit of an opportunity? I mean, when you have someone like Wemby, your window is as long as he plays. He's that good. But do you think that they could potentially, if they stay on this pace around the deadline, maybe make a move to give themselves a real shot this year?
Right now, I think they're more internal. Like I think the big move they made last year was getting De'Aaron Fox, and then I think from there they really want to see what this group internally can do. Because kind of like Oklahoma City the last few years, it's like we don't really know what we have until we see what our players can do come playoff time. And I think that's the next step for them is going into the playoffs with this group, seeing what can they do in the playoffs. Can they get by in a round? Can they make a round competitive? How far can you go? And then from there, I think you make judgments, you make the right tweaks that you need to make on your roster. And so I think a lot with the Spurs internal, man. I really do see what De'Aaron Fox looks like with this group when they get back. But a lot of it is going to be driven by Victor Wembanyama, his health, how he's doing. And I think we have to look at the young stars in today's game, like how focused they are and how determined they look. When you look at him, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Anthony Edwards, Luka Doncic, I'm probably missing a couple here, but like these guys just have a drive, a focus, and they clearly want to be great and they want to be the best versions of themselves. Like Anthony Edwards cut so much, weight. Like he's so trim entering this year. And now he's got a hamstring injury. So it's like, that's clearly like he's worked so hard, then he pulls a muscle. But Wemby, you look at the work that he did in the offseason. You train with KG, you train with Hakeem Olajuwon, you spend time with the monks abroad. So he's done so much of everything. Like I heard a funny story. He spent a week in Houston working out with Hakeem Olajuwon. Every day they're having these on-court sessions, and then afterward they would play ping pong together. And someone around Victor Wembanyama told me he literally lost every game against Hakeem Olajuwon in ping pong. He did not win once. Hakeem beat him every single time, but every day he was back at it, wanting to play Hakeem at ping pong, and he would just take L's. And I'm like, that's the only L he's taking all summer, all year. Like, because then he goes on the court and he's able to absorb all these lessons and just how dominant he looks. His competitive fire, I think, is great to see.
You think the league as a whole is starting to value continuity right now in developing young guys? I mean, that model in Oklahoma City worked. Even Minnesota keeping the same kind of nucleus together. I think there could be a real shift that's happened now that multiple stars being the blueprint and then putting minimums around them and different role players may be of the last era.
We're definitely seeing teams more prioritize depth and seeing, how can we build a team built around, athletic, multifaceted players being able to impact the game on multiple levels, defensively, offensively, having length, having size. You're definitely seeing that. I think Indiana was a byproduct of that. Oklahoma City obviously was a byproduct of that. You got to have the star power, of course, but you need to also have players, teams that can go 8, 9, 10 deep in the playoffs. I think has become increasingly important, and that means, I think having teams that are built around maybe 1 or 2 megastars, and then a team full of just dogs and two-way players. I think we have seen that shift. And I do wonder how much of that shift also just by necessity of the second apron and the first apron, and teams wanting to stay out of those aprons because if you're in the second apron for more than a year or two, you're basically in basketball hell. You're just strong. You're hamstrung on what you could really accomplish, what you could do in trades and signings and free agency and whatnot. So I think having all those facets are because of the second apron to an extent.
Yeah. So I know it's early, but is there something that like fans should keep their eye on leading into February, into the trade deadline?
Well, I think it is early, but seeing some of these teams, who becomes a seller, that's always something that you have to keep an eye on. Obviously Washington is the team that's playing for the future. Brooklyn's a team that's playing for the future. So are there players in both of those teams that end up being, high valued assets? You saw in Brooklyn last year, Dorian Finney-Smith, Dennis Schroeder were early season trade guys. Who is that going to be this summer or this season? Like which player could emerge this season as an early trade candidate? I think just long term, How does Milwaukee do as the course of the year? How do they fare in the playoffs? What's Giannis Antetokounmpo's future like? Trae Young is another player, didn't sign an extension in the offseason. He could be a free agent in the offseason this upcoming year. So I think a lot of teams are monitoring, eyeing that situation in Atlanta. And then LeBron James, we don't know how his career is going to end. We don't know how this season is going to end for him. Does he finish his career in LA? So I definitely have my eye on him. But right now we're seeing parity take shape around the league. Some teams that not many people expected, whether it's Chicago, Philly, San Antonio, get out the gates to undefeated starts. But those are kind of the things that I'm monitoring.
How did Chicago get off to the start? What do you think it is that they're playing well?
Well, they've also been able to get off of a couple guys, veteran players that were on big contracts in DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine, and basically shift into the future of this team and just prioritize Josh Giddey, Matas Buzelis, and then Vucevic plays a much bigger role now with this team with the moves that they made. So I think it's really leaning into your young guys. And then Kobe White hasn't even played yet this season. That was their leading scorer last year, especially after they made the trades. And so I think it's just leaning into a different group that you want to see. What do we have here? Because, the reality is, and DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine know this, if they're on the team, you're prioritizing these guys as focal points. If they're off the team, you're kind of by necessity, Buzelis, let's see what you can do. Kobe White, Josh Giddey, you're kind of prioritizing those guys. And clearly the chemistry that those guys are showing, Matas Buzelis looks like an early season most improved player of the year candidate. Josh Giddey looks like a triple-double threat on every night. They're getting great performances out of Vucevic. So I think it's just a group that's young, that's hungry, and Billy Donovan, typically does well when he has a team that really placates to how he wants to coach.
I forget Billy Donovan's the coach of Chicago sometimes. Like, he was such a big personality at University of Florida. He obviously got 1 year with Kevin and Russ, and then he stayed in Oklahoma City for a little bit. But he's kind of just like a journeyman coach in the NBA, not knocking him. I mean, he's a great coach. But, I was somewhat surprised. Not that I didn't think he deserved to stay, but I was surprised that he stayed. And obviously they see like him as a big chip in building for the future, or they wouldn't have kept him with this young nucleus.
Yeah, the Bulls, from ownership to front office, like they really love Billy Donovan there and what he brings on a daily basis. It's funny when you talk to players and people that knew him and were coached by him at Florida, they talk about this fiery coach and this coach that will just lash out at you and brings this East Coast flair. And I'm sure he had a little bit of that in Oklahoma City as well. But and I do believe he still brings that in flashes. But now in Chicago, you just see someone that's just poised, focused, knows exactly what he wants to accomplish. And I think the leadership that he's brought, I think the Bulls really value that. I think the Bulls really value his ability to coach the younger players on that team. And so I think you're seeing a coach that's able to, when he has a group that is committed to what he's trying to do, he's shown to have a lot of success. And, say what you want about that DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine team. When Lonzo Ball was healthy there, they were the number 3 seed that season.
Yeah.
I believe it was 2020-21. They were looking like a legitimate Eastern Conference threat, and then Lonzo Ball goes down, and really everything gets disrupted there.
Yeah. You think Kyrie's back before All-Star, or is it definitely after All-Star?
From everything that his goal has been, I think the Mavericks, their goal has been, it's looked like around January at the earliest. That's kind of the window that people around the team are looking at. But for him, is he feeling 100%? How is the team performing? I think those are all things that are going to go into it. An ACL recovery, as much as we've been able to see him do, like we're seeing him go one-on-one against the coaches, we're seeing him do more and more. He looks fluid when he's on the floor. I think the next step for him is just doing live contact, is my understanding, and being able to be cleared fully for contact. And don't know when that could be, but that's really what the Mavericks doctors, Kyrie Irving's side, they're going to have to figure out is that ramp up process is when do you get to that? Is that going to be second half of or is that going to be closer to the new year? Is that going to be after the new year? But clearly a lot with him is going to be a lot with that team is going to be dependent on, is he going to be able to make it back on the court?
And is there any realistic belief that Tatum could come back this year?
His goal is certainly playing this year. I just know if and when he plays is going to be predicated on a group of probably 15 to 20 people, doctors, team officials. So as much as he will want to play and his goal, and I think he's been very careful. He said his goal is to try to play this year. He's waking up every day trying to make sure he can play this year. And I think mentally, emotionally, physically pushing yourself to that, I think only helps in his rehab. The actuality of playing this year, if he can get there medically, if he's 100%, he's 120%, then he will. But that's going to be predicated on probably a group of a dozen plus doctors and team officials and medical people that can confer with Jason Tatum and people around him.
Yeah. I understand it from a motivating factor, right? You need these goals when you're in this long, grueling rehab. From watching it firsthand, though, I just don't know if I see the purpose when someone has so much in front of them. But I understand it from putting that in front of you and making that the goal every day.
So Rich, obviously Kevin got, what did he get? 16 months between games, I think, something like that, 15, 16 months. What went into that decision-making for you guys to, decide? I believe he had a choice to play in the bubble, didn't play in the bubble. What was that kind of decision for you guys? And just saying listen, we'll take the extra 4 or 5 months to be, because when he came back, he was, obviously Kevin Durant, if not better than the Kevin Durant we needed.
The bubble wasn't even realistic. I don't even think he was ready around the bubble time. I mean, I think different from Jason is we pretty much set that goal early on. So it was the same type of timeline, but it was let's eye the start of next season where I'm back better than ever. Let's eye this month where I'm back on the court. So it was never even, the goal was never even put in front of him in that way. And then obviously when COVID hit, that was not the time under those circumstances, even if he was physically ready to come back in the bubble and play. Have another question for you. The gambling thing that has come up in the league, it's interesting because I've read a lot about it, and the NBA gets a lot of for it, right? And they talk about the idea that the NBA was pioneer in letting gambling companies come on as sponsors, and obviously gambling has become regulated in more and more states. Prop bets were introduced, and obviously that became a problem. But I can't figure out where the NBA can manage that. I don't necessarily think this is a result of the NBA taking sponsorship from gambling companies. It's not. I mean, I'm confident in saying that. I think ultimately there's just a lot more variables in play now, and this is if this is true and this ends up being what's been reported, it's obviously a negative just for the sport, whether there's anyone on the league that could have done anything different. But what is your feeling since this has gone down in terms of if there is even a route that the NBA could take differently?
The NBA is definitely looking hard at figuring out what the best policies are, what their best internal methods are, whether it's injury reporting, whether it's their communication with the sports books. Right now, the way it's going, these prop bets and different bets, if something gets flagged, the NBA and the sports books are alerted immediately, and the sports books flag it. The NBA's in knowledge of that. That's how Jontay Porter was able to be found, and that situation was able to be accounted for. That's how Terry Rozier's situation, first in March 2023, was even detected. Was the sports books flagging it, alerting the NBA, alerting whoever else needs to know, authorities, and I think so. So the system is there for alerting. Now it's just, before it even gets to that, is there a way to mitigate it? Is there a way to regulate it the proper way? So the NBA is having those conversations with the sports books. Is there a way to figure out prop bets? Is there a way to figure out, a category of players that should not necessarily be involved here, like two-way contracts? Like Jontay Porter was really the player that tipped this all off, that a lot of the people, the co-conspirators that were involved in the Jontay Porter case are involved with Damon Jones, Terry Rozier, Chauncey Billups. There's so much intertwined there. And so because they were able to detect that, because they were able to find that, it's led them to now a bunch of other, the FBI, that is, it's led the FBI to so much other stuff, including the illegal poker rigging matches that were mafia led. And so overall, I think that the NBA has to continue to have those conversations. One thing I think that internally is going to be addressed and discussed is the injury reporting, because, having examples of, like, even on Thursday night when Giannis Antetokounmpo is declared out for the game after being listed probable all day, but he's listed out 57 minutes before the game. Is there a way to mitigate that? Is there a way to solve that for the fans, the audience, whoever's betting out there? So these are all things that the NBA sports books, they're all trying to figure out is how to regulate it the proper way.
Yeah. I mean, the other way of looking at it, though, is that, the mechanisms are in place for the gambling companies with their responsible gaming operations to flag these things, right? So the only thing that would have been worse is if these things weren't flagged and this continued to go on. I do understand the idea of, like, should a two-way player be listed in a prop bet, right? Is that they're just set up for failure, right? And do they become a target to bad actors outside of the league? But for the most part, I think what has to be understood is that this is not like an epidemic. These are like a few select cases. The world has changed. We see examples of this in every walk of life. The stakes are higher. The connectivity and the knowledge of what's going on has never been greater. And gambling has become a major part in a fabric of the game, and that comes new things that you've got to deal with. And I would imagine that historically there's always been cases of this that went kind of unnoticed. And the prop bets obviously bring a new layer into it because it's more about the player than the game. But I do think that ultimately the idea that this came to the league's attention, right, is what people should also think about, right? That the mechanisms are in place to find out who's doing this. And to me, that's better than if this thing went unnoticed and this, for whatever reason, existed in the league. So it'd be interesting to see what they do. Obviously, they'll have to do something because publicly, I don't think the fans will allow there to be no action. But I also think a lot needs to be kind of told about what was found the last few weeks. And it's really, like, I would imagine, reverberated around the league about Chauncey just because his reputation was so incredible.
Yeah, I mean, Chauncey Billups' involvement in all this obviously was the major, major surprise across the NBA. Like, one thing to talk about sports betting and insider information. It's a whole other thing. It's two separate cases here. That is one thing. The FBI lumped them both together. There were a couple cross entities, people that were involved in both, so you're able to kind of lump it together. But Chauncey Billups was allegedly involved in rigging illegal poker games and being essentially a face card, is what the government calls it, to lure fish, as the government calls it, to get money. And it being led by the mafia, it's straight out of a movie, right? And so it's something that no one knew about, something that obviously not many people in the NBA could even fathom. A sitting NBA head coach. The fact that a sitting NBA head coach was arrested hours after a game, a Hall of Fame player no less. It's jarring. It was stunning for everyone in the NBA, and it's something that the NBA now has to deal with the fallout. And but that is the NBA community. Now, what the NBA can actually deal with and what they are dealing with is this insider information trading of it all. But another conversation I've heard from teams and people on the league is, like, this is stuff that, if a player's telling people around him and close to him that, hey, I'm really not feeling well, I might sit this game, you're not expecting the people that you're telling to go out and bet, on that. And that's something that, like, how do you police that? How do you legislate that?
Did you ever think you'd break a story and have a tweet that included La Cosa Nostra?
Man, I certainly I never expected a mafia NBA crossover. I'll tell you that. Never expected that. But that's the job, right? Every morning you just wake up and you never know what could cross your desk.
Yep. Before you get out of here, any info or any thoughts around expansion?
So NBA Europe is, as far as I understand, much closer along, and that's really in process here over the next 2-3 years, getting that finalized. My feel is that NBA expansion probably trickles closer to after that. than it is injunction or before that. So I don't have a time period. If I say 5 to 8 years, I don't want to be aggregated as that. But I think once it starts getting like Rich, like once it starts trickling into like ownership conversations and the owners are meeting about it and GMs are starting to meet about it, then to me it becomes like, okay, we might be 2-3 years away, and we're not at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm excited for NBA Europe. I think as a business model and a concept, it's very strong. Very strong.
Yeah, I mean, I think that figuring out who's going to be the owners is definitely like something that I'm, keen on and really trying to get on top of, because I think you could see some former players involved. Obviously, a lot of people still associated with the NBA still involved, and I think just that project in general, being able to provide a new lever for the league, I think could be very interesting to monitor.